Hello, friends. The generation that many said would never achieve anything. The one always mocked for being glued to screens, for being lazy, for being incapable of bringing any real change. That very generation, the Gen Z, has now shaken an entire nation. In Nepal, the government has been brought down, streets are burning with anger, and the voices of young people have become louder than ever before. The Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, has been forced to resign. His residence was set ablaze, the parliament engulfed in flames, and the finance minister himself was chased down the streets by protesters, beaten with shoes as thousands cheered. In the middle of this chaos, tragedy struck. The former prime minister's wife lost her life when their home was set on fire. This begs one question. What could drive young people to risk everything, to face bullets, to set their own capital city on fire? Many thought it was simply because of the social media ban, but friends, the truth is much deeper. On the 8th of September, 2025, Kathmandu became the epicenter of a movement that no one saw coming. Thousands of students gathered, many of them still wearing school and college uniforms, all between the ages of 20 and 25. They were led by an NGO called Hami Nepal, marching from Madhukar Mandala, a symbolic monument, straight towards the parliament. Their protest was peaceful at first. No violence, just voices echoing in unison. But the government didn't want these voices to reach the parliament gates. So they deployed police armed with water cannons, tear gas, and rubber bullets. The young protesters stood firm, but what happened next shocked the nation. Instead of restraint, the police opened fire with real bullets. 19 protesters were killed that day. Hundreds more were injured. And among them, a child of only 12 years old lost their life. How could a government that claims to be democratic order such brutality on its own children? When this news spread, Nepal erupted. What started as a student protest turned into a national uprising. People poured into the streets not only in Kathmandu, but also in Pokhara, Butwal, Bharatpur, Damak, and beyond. The government panicked, imposing a curfew at 3:30 p.m. But the curfew didn't stop anyone. More and more people joined the protests, filling roads and squares, chanting for justice. They were no longer afraid, because silence had already cost them too much. The world may think this was only about banning social media apps. Yes, that was part of it. In November 2023, the government ordered all social media companies to register with Nepal's Ministry of Communication, demanding a local presence in the country. They said it was to curb hate speech, fake news, and cyber crimes. But the truth was different. Only a handful of platforms registered, the biggest among them being the Chinese owned TikTok. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, WhatsApp, Twitter, Snapchat, all were banned. And so, on the 28th of August this year, the ban was enforced. 26 platforms gone overnight. Overnight, communication was crippled. Young people saw this not just as a technical ban, but as an attack on their freedom of speech. On TikTok, the only surviving platform, Nepali youth began exposing the irony. They compared their struggles to the flashy, privileged lives of politicians' children. They made hashtag #NEPOKids and hashtag #NEPOBaby trend, highlighting how ministers' children flaunted luxury cars, foreign trips, and designer clothes while ordinary Nepali children returned home in coffins from foreign wars. This inequality cut deep. By 2024, Nepal's youth unemployment rate stood at more than 20%. Imagine 1 in every 5 young people without a job, with no opportunities in their own land. So desperate were they that thousands signed up to fight in Russia's war against Ukraine, risking death just to earn a salary. Over 15,000 Nepalis were sent to the front lines by February 2024, barely trained, lured with promises of a few $1,000s a month. Many never returned home. Meanwhile, The politicians' children flaunted Gucci bags and expensive watches on Instagram. Can you imagine the pain of watching your friend's body return in a coffin, while at the same time seeing the sons of ministers post photos with luxury cars? It was only a matter of time before this rage exploded. And when the ban on social media was announced, it was the last straw. Not only did it silence people, it also hurt the economy. Tourism, Nepal's lifeline, relies heavily on social media for outreach and bookings. That came crashing down. Millions of Nepali families also lost their only affordable way of staying connected with loved ones abroad. Remember, more than 7 million Nepalis work or study outside their country. Overnight, their video calls and messages were cut off. Friends, if you're watching this right now and feel that these young people's voices matter, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because here, you and I try to uncover the truth that powerful people want to hide. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next, because the story of Nepal's revolt is just getting started. The anger that was boiling in the streets of Nepal was not just about social media. It was about years of frustration with leaders who seemed to care only for themselves. For decades, the same few politicians in their 70s had ruled the country, taking turns at power like players in a never-ending game of musical chairs. Pushpa Kamal Dahal, Sher Bahadur Duiba, KP Sharma Oli, the faces kept rotating, the coalitions kept breaking, but the problems of the people remained the same. Corruption, unemployment, and mismanagement haunted every household. And then came the arrogance of banning social media, cutting off jobs, tourism, and family connections. For the youth of Nepal, this was proof that their leaders had stopped listening to them. In March earlier this year, smaller protests had already begun. Many had even started questioning whether democracy itself had failed. Some voices went so far as to say Nepal should return to monarchy. Think about that. The monarchy was abolished in 2008 after a long struggle. It was seen as a victory for the people, a chance to build a democratic republic. But in the past 17 years, Nepal has seen 13 governments come and go. 13 governments in 17 years. Constant instability, broken promises, and corruption scandals at every corner. So it is no surprise that many citizens began wondering if they had fought for democracy only to be betrayed again. The list of corruption allegations against leaders reads like a nightmare. Sher Bahadur Duiba, accused of taking bribes for aircraft deals. His wife, Arzu Rana Duiba, accused of faking documents to present Nepalis as Bhutanese refugees to send them to the U.S. Pushpa Kamal Dahal, accused of diverting billions meant for Maoist fighters. KP Sharma Oli himself, under investigation for illegally converting land. And 3 other former prime ministers, accused of selling government property to private buyers. To make things worse, since 2006, a policy has protected politicians from being investigated for their so-called policy decisions. In simple words, leaders could steal, cheat, or misuse their positions, and no one could touch them. This immunity became a breeding ground for corruption. For the young generation, seeing their parents work hard every day just to survive, while leaders lived in luxury with immunity from accountability, was too much to bear. Social media had become the only tool to expose this hypocrisy. Hashtags like hashtag #NEPOKids and hashtag #NEPOBaby were not just jokes, they were raw expressions of pain. Posters at protests read, "Politicians' children bring Gucci bags, while the children of common people come home in coffins." Every word cut like a knife, reminding the nation of those who died fighting someone else's war because there were no jobs at home. So, when the protests intensified, the government responded not with compassion, but with force. Peaceful marches were met with tear gas. Curfews were imposed to silence voices. And finally, live bullets were fired into crowds of unarmed citizens. That was the breaking point. Protesters set fire to the Prime Minister's residence, the President's house, even the opposition leader's home. Helicopters had to be used to evacuate ministers. It was as if the entire system was collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. By the 9th of September, around 2 p.m., Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli resigned. The Home Minister had already stepped down, and the ban on social media was lifted. But the protests did not stop. The people were no longer fighting just for apps or jobs. They were fighting for dignity, justice, and a future. They were demanding systemic reforms. Even Nepal's army chief had to step in and appeal for peace, reminding citizens that the nation was on the brink of chaos. Friends, Nepal today is a warning to every government around the world. When corruption, unemployment, and inequality are ignored for too long, when leaders try to silence the voices of the young, the result is not silence. It is an explosion. Once people lose faith in the system, law and order collapse faster than anyone can imagine. And when that happens, dangerous alternatives creep in. In Nepal, some groups are already using this chaos to push for monarchy again. But that is not the answer. Replacing democracy with dictatorship or monarchy will not solve corruption. The solution has to be found within democracy, through accountability, transparency, and real reforms. The story of Nepal is heartbreaking, but it also carries hope. It shows that young voices, even when underestimated, can bring down the most powerful. It proves that silence can never last forever, and that someday truth will break through the lies. And now, I want to ask you something. What do you think is the real solution for Nepal? Should the country reform its democracy? Or will people really push it back into monarchy? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this is not just about Nepal. This is a lesson for every one of us, for every nation where leaders forget that power belongs to the people.